So paragraph 487 of the Catholic Catechism tells us that the Catholic faith believes anything that it does about Mary based off of what it believes about Jesus. So in regard to whether or not Jesus had other brothers and sisters from Mary, one of the verses that gets brought forward a lot is at the tail end of Matthew 12, where the people turn to Jesus when he's talking to a group of people and they say, "Your mother and your brethren are asking to speak with you." And he turns to the group and he says, "Who are my brethren and who is my mother? I tell you, whoever does the will of my Father are my brothers and sisters," and that. So when we look at the word brethren, we see it used repeatedly in the Old Testament, but then also recurringly in the New Testament. We see Paul use it in Romans chapter 9, verse 3, and he refers to as Israelite kinsmen. And so he's using brethren. It was never, even in the Old Testament, there are points in Deuteronomy or 2 Samuel where it talks about not a blood relation, but it uses this term brethren. It can be a distant cousin. It can be anything like that. So in this particular passage, when Jesus says this, what he's actually doing from the understanding of the church is he's almost redefining brethren too, in the fact that Abraham, our founding father of our faith, he was guaranteed descendants, right? And so we have this lineage from him to David to Christ. And Christ then, through his crucifixion and resurrection, he's able to say, "Whoever does the will of my Father are my brothers and sisters," and therefore expanding even further this idea of brethren, that anyone who participates within what his ministry is then considered his brother and sister, and therefore a descendant of Abraham. So that's one backing of it. Another place that gets brought up is at the foot of the cross. There are obviously several Marys here. There's Mary, the mother of Jesus. There's Mary, the mother of, Mary Magdalene. And then there's Mary, the mother of James and Joseph, which some people will take and say, well, that's Mary, the mother of God. Nowhere, you look at, wedding in Cana, it says the mother of Jesus. Nowhere in the New Testament does it say Mary, the mother of Jesus, James, and Joseph, or Mary, the mother of Jesus and anyone. Anytime that Mary is referenced as the mother of Jesus, it is only ever as the mother of Jesus. So, and then in Mark, it says Mary, the mother of James the younger, Joseph, and Salome. That's how you pronounce it. But obviously, I'm not a linguistic, but from what I've read, with the Greek word for brethren, it doesn't mean literal blood relative. So further along the line of her actual virginity, beyond even, maybe he didn't have other siblings then, but her and Joseph were still married, and they still had to consummate their vows, their marriage, in order to make it a real marriage. So the teaching of the church would say that they had what was called a Josephite wedding, which is actually, it's named after St. Joseph, and there are other marriages that are like it, but it's one where it's still a legal marriage because the right to consummate is still present, but it was never actually done. So it continues on in that. And when we look at prophecies of the Old Testament, one that came to mind was in Ezekiel. Ezekiel's taken to a mountaintop, and God is showing him these visions of the tabernacles, of where the priests will reside. And so in Ezekiel 44, it says, "Then the man brought me back to the outer gate of the sanctuary, the one facing east, and it was shut. The Lord said to me, 'This gate is to remain shut. It must not be opened. No one may enter through it. It is to remain shut because the Lord, the God of Israel, has entered through it. The prince himself is the only one who may sit inside the gateway to eat in the presence of the Lord. He is to enter by way of the portico of the gateway and then go out the same way.'" So when we look at Christ, right, because the whole Old Testament is a foreshadowing of Christ coming into the world, we see here talking about the tabernacle, because if you watch some of my other videos on Mary, I talk more about how she's the Ark of the New Covenant, similar to how we had the Ark of the Old Covenant. So we have the Ark of the New Covenant here, and then we see that it says, "It is to remain shut because the Lord, the God of Israel, has entered through it. The prince himself is the only one who may sit inside the gateway to eat in the presence of the Lord." So by Mary not physically bearing any other children, she is therefore fulfilling that. Looking at things that have been said by St. Thomas Aquinas, it says that Mary's virginal womb was the shrine of the Holy Spirit, so it was unbecoming and presumptuous for any man to defile this shrine. So we see here very clearly the lining up of, okay, here's this holy space, similar to the Ark of the Old Covenant, this holy space that's reserved specifically for the Son of God. And through that, if Mary had other children, and if they had consummated the marriage, it wouldn't have fully fulfilled the prophecies of the Old Testament that would make Christ who he says he is anyway. So, yeah, just going back to that paragraph in the Catechism, anything that the Church believes about Mary is based off of what we believe about Christ and who he says he is and who he is supposed to be. So that's all for today. I'm kind of curious on what kind of arguments will come forward with this, so please feel free to comment. I'm honestly intrigued, so I'll look forward to reading a little bit there, and otherwise, yeah, check out any other videos, and I'll see you guys again next week. Have a great day.